This is Professor Vancello, and this is a video about methods in Java. I'll talk about methods in general a bit and look specifically at a program that calculates the area of a rectangle using a method. I recommend first starting a program like this by making sure you can get it to work without a method. Methods have many uses, such as breaking a complex problem down into more simple manageable tasks. It helps with collaboration, it helps with code reuse. So there's a lot of benefits to modules, but if you can't get a program working without them, there's no sense in trying to add them. So let's just make sure this works. I'm just assigning values to variables. We could enhance this program later on to get input from the user, but for now, since the purpose really is just to demonstrate methods, I'll assign manually. When it comes to the actual syntax, the Java tutorials website provides syntax for a working example. I strongly recommend you read that entire page. And it tells you about naming conventions for methods, that they should have a verb. And then the things inside parentheses in the method header, that's what we just added, was a method header, is called the method signature. It has to include several components, and the parts inside the parentheses in the header are called the parameter variables. So here's where we declare variables that will be received when we call the module or method. I'm using those terms kind of interchangeably. Technically, a method is a module that's within a class. And since our program is a class, our module is a method. Alright, we get some squiggly lines when we do this. We moved our calculation into the method, but there's this thing called scope, which means that variables are only visible within the method in which they are declared. So since double length and double width were declared in main, I can't use those names inside calculate area. Same thing with area. It was declared in main, I couldn't use it. Now this has to do with returning a value. Right? This is called a function in some languages. When a method returns a value, we need the keyword return, and this is what's going to allow the calculation to get back to main. Right? Passing in arguments and receiving parameters is what allows values to get into a module, and return is what allows a value to get out. Now, the key thing to understand is that the module has to have a call in order for it to run. That code's just going to sit there until it's called. And with a function, which is a module that returns a value, the call itself will take on the value of whatever is returned. Alright, here's an error you might see in Java: static reference, non-static method, and the quick fix is actually what you need in this situation. The keyword static goes into the header, and that's a special keyword that allows the method to be created without creating an instance of the class of the program. You don't really need to worry about that right now, just follow the quick fix and put it in there. Make sure your parentheses all match up, and you see this program works just as it did before. It's been made a little bit more complicated for this example, but that's just to demonstrate the concept. Alright, to help understand what's really going on here, what I strongly recommend you do when you're creating programs that use methods, or even programs that don't use methods, is to draw it out on paper. And draw a box for every variable that you create. Alright, so the first line, double length, was to create a variable, and then double width creates a variable. And the key thing to understand to help you visualize and conceptualize scope is put all the variables created within a method into a bigger box. So those variables were created in a method named main. Alright, so because of scope, those variables are only visible and only can be used within main. We have another method in this program that we just added called calculate area. So I'm going to draw another big box for calculate area. And an important thing to understand is that by putting variables in parentheses in the header, you're actually creating those memory locations and can work with them. So there's 3 variables in calculate area. There's the length, or side 1, side 2, and area. Notice I've got different names for my arguments, which are in parentheses in the call, and the parameters, which is in parentheses in the header, because their methods are designed to be general purpose. So it might be length and width in this example, but it could mean something else in another example. So they really should be different names. And I should have put the values in here when I started, because that first line that creates the variable is actually initializing it with a value. And by putting it in parentheses, a copy of the value goes into these other boxes. The first thing in parentheses in the call goes to the first thing in parentheses in the header, and the second thing in parentheses goes to the second thing. They match up. So the parentheses is what transports values from main to calculate area. To get something back from calculate area, that's what the return is doing. We could store that in another variable, we could use it in a calculation, but in this example all we're doing is sending it to the system.out.println. So the most important thing to understand is that the call itself, what I've highlighted there, takes on the value of whatever gets returned. So I return area, the call, which makes program execution go down to the method, takes on the value of what gets returned. This is